Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Tonight I want to talk to you about how a lot of us, we have, as a result of our interactions with other people, the parenting, the culture, society, community, a lot of us, unfortunately, we have learned to ignore certain parts of ourselves. And what do I mean by ignore? Well, let me let me give you an example and explain it there. See, for a person who, for example, hasn't managed to fix their anger, right? So it's a nice person. Most of the times they're really nice. Suddenly, they feel a sudden urge of anger. They lash out and they hurt others. Okay? Now, usually what happens is that this person becomes mad at the anger, right? That part of them that gets angry, right? So as you can see, the anger is part of them, but now because they don't like what anger is doing to them or how anger makes them act, they don't like it, they reject it. Now, what happens when they reject their anger? They think that, well, this is me, I don't like my anger. But behind the anger, there are so many real concerns they have. There are so many, for example, maybe problems. There are so many wounds. In other words, there's so many parts of themselves as well behind that anger that when the person rejects their anger or gets mad at their anger and doesn't want to accept that this is part of them, wants to get rid of it totally, what happens is that they are also getting rid of parts of themselves. In other words, the way we have learned how to deal with something we find in ourselves that we don't like is to cut it and put it away. But this clearly doesn't work because no one can cut part of themselves. It's not like anger is part of your shirt that you can cut and throw it away. No, anger is part of you. So all we do by cutting it and trying to ignore it is that we are creating a division inside ourselves. So our personality becomes fragmented, right? Because you cannot cut part of who you are. The part of you that got angry, yes, maybe it doesn't know how to share its anger. Maybe it doesn't know how to voice its concerns. But it's part of you. There is some pain or some getting unheard or hurt that led to it being angry, right? There is something there. So if you want to reject all of that, it's not going to go away. All that happens is that you create a division in your personality. So you're saying this whole, I am not all of who I am. No, I don't want to accept my anger and all of the parts which are related to it. So very immediately you create a division in the person that you are. And what happens when we have a fragmented personality like this? These two parts don't communicate with one another, right? These two parts, it's as if the whole person has now turned into two smaller personalities and they're not communicating with each other. Why? Because in order to communicate, you have to accept this one, but you don't want to accept it. You say, you're bad, I don't want you. So you don't communicate with that part of you, so both of them remain as separate personalities. Now, most of the times when you have power, when life hasn't made you tired, when you're not on the edge, right, when you've got most of your CPU, you manage to push this one down. So this personality is all that you show to the world and even to yourself. Like you may even forget that this is part of you. Because right now you've got energy, you're not tired, you can suppress this. Don't talk, you tell to your anger. Don't talk. You push it out. So you take this part only. But what happens is that if you get a little bit hurt, or if you get, for example, your energy comes low, or you're a little bit stressed, or you're irritated, agitated, what happens is that you lose, because it requires a lot of energy to suppress part of yourself, right? And then when you have less energy, this part comes up And because they don't communicate, when this one comes up, it pushes you down and it takes all of the control. And you see a person who is super nice, who is very considerate of others, make sure he doesn't hurt anyone. Suddenly, another personality is appearing, breaks hard, lashes out, throws things around. Like, where was this? Well, this was the part of them which they had pushed down, which they had refused to accept, which they had denied reality to, right? All this time they had pushed it down. Now what happens is that because it requires a lot of energy to push it down, as soon as your energy became less, you stopped pushing it down, it came over and it pushed you down, pushed the rest of you down. Now, so this was one example. You see, we find something inside ourselves, we don't like it, and the way we deal with this situation is that I want to cut you and throw it away. Now, in order to show you how this is not a good attitude, let me give you an example of our physical life, our physical body, right? Imagine if we did the same thing that we do to our psyche and personality, if we did the same thing to our body. Like, let's say my hand, there's something about it that I don't like, right? Let's say, for example, my hand is in a lot of pain. Would I now come and cut my hand and say, I don't want this hand anymore? Right? That's exactly what we're doing to our psyche. As soon as there's something about it which we don't like, instead of trying to sit with it, see what's going on, why is it behaving this way, we try to cut it, ignore it, and throw it away. Now, it could be anger, it could be certain temptations, it could be lust, right? And so we create a kind of self-image for ourselves, a person that we would like to be. And so then we say that, you know what, I'm a nice person. And then any part of our experience which according to us doesn't match the self-image that we've created, we cut it and ignore it. But the problem is it's not going anywhere. We're also fragmenting our personality, and it's going to create all sorts of issues for us. Now, in the rest of the night, I will try to open up what are some of the challenges that this creates for us. By the way, I am not saying that anger is good or we need to allow anger to be there, we need to lash out at people. No, I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that the way to deal with anger is not to ignore it, is to create a kind of communication between the different parts of ourselves. In other words, the way to handle the things, the experiences you have, the parts of you which are not in line with the person you want to be, is not to ignore them, get mad at them and cut them. No, but to communicate with them and learn to integrate them inside yourself, right? Think of them as if, for example, you're a family and there's a child that has certain behaviors which doesn't go with the standards and the values of the family, right? No good parent would be like, okay, this is a bad child, let's bury this child somewhere, let's get rid of it. No, they'll be like, okay, what ways can we do so that this child can become part of this family, can belong? Maybe it has certain concerns which we could benefit from, right? So in the same way that a person can learn a lot from the part of them that comes out and lashes out at people, a person can learn a lot from their anger, right? Maybe they need to learn to stand up for themselves. Maybe they need to learn to, for example, be more assertive. Okay? So there's so much we can learn from the parts of us that we're mad at. So we need to, so see, this is what I'm saying. If there's part of us that we don't like, the way is not to get rid of it, to ignore it, to cut it. No. The way is to find a way to domesticate it, to integrate it, to become to bring it so that it becomes part of the whole that you are. Okay? Now, we gave an example of anger. I want to give you another example as well. For example, lust. Okay? Masalan, if a person has some temptations, some fantasies, some thoughts, right? Now, let's say there's a person, and I have to speak a little bit carefully because it's a sensitive topic. We have viewers from different age, so parents also please be careful if you've got children watching. But I'll try to be very careful in the way I handle this topic. So imagine there's a person who their self-image is that I'm a very loyal partner, okay? Or I want to be a pious person, let's say. Loyal partner, pious person. But they find, or for example, yeah, it doesn't even have to be married, maybe a teenager or a person in their 20s, etc. They're not married. Their idea of themselves that I want to be a pious person, I want to live a certain way. Now, this is the self-image they've created for themselves. This is who I want to be, a pious person, a religious person, etc., etc. But then they realize there's a part of them that seems like it's not matching this. For example, it gets certain ideas, or it enjoys certain things, looking at things. It may not even be on purpose. They're going on the street, they see something, I enjoyed this, right? Now, if a person says, okay, I'm a good person, I'm a loyal person, now I saw something which would mean that I'm being disloyal to my partner. So if I ignore this, right? Let me ignore this. Oh, this is bad. Now, you see, this is the exact moment I'm talking about. A person says, I'm loyal, I love my partner, but now my inner experience shows that part of me enjoyed seeing something. Now, how do you deal with that? See? This is the core of what I'm talking about. Should the person say, oh, this is rubbish, this is very bad, this is terrible, that's not who I am, ignore that, cut that? Or is there another way? Now, that was one example of a person who's married, suddenly enjoys something or gets a temptation, etc. Another person could be like, okay, I'm not married, I want to be pious, I want to live according to, for example, these values that I have, for example, but now I find in myself a very serious temptation to do something, to gain a certain pleasure, right? And at this point, it's like there's a fight between the self-image that the person has, I'm a religious what person, and a very real experience of who they are, which is, I really want this pleasure, right? Now, how do people usually deal with this? They try to ignore the existence of this thing inside them, right? And naturally, because it's so difficult to accept, it's not I totally get it. Why a person would not want to accept that, I'm married and I'm loving my partner and I'm loyal to them, but then I have this thing inside. Who would want to accept that? It's very difficult. It's annoying. No, it goes against the self-image I have. So you would cut it, ignore it. It's wrong. It's bad. It shouldn't be there. Okay? And another person who, for example, is not married, wants to be pious, etc., but suddenly feels this urge or even maybe an action to gain a certain type of pleasure. And they feel terrible about it. So, for example, even if they go and they do that action and they gain that pleasure afterwards, as soon as the action is done, the pleasure is gone. So, see, it's like they had cut that part of themselves. Now, when the temptation becomes so strong, that part of them comes up, does whatever it wants to do, gains that pleasure, gains that satisfaction, and then as soon as it does that, it goes out and the other part of the person is up, right? I've spoken about this many times, that if you have a cut personality, if you have ignored parts of yourself, then when the pressure becomes too much, that thing which you have ignored and cut from yourself will come up, take control, push you down, does whatever it wants to do, and then it will go, right? So, for example, you're a person who's trying to act pious, the pressure comes too much, temptation comes too much, that part of you which enjoys the temptation will come up, push you down, does whatever it wants to do. Once it's satisfied, it will go away, and then you come up again and you're like, oh my God, what did I do? What did I do? Right? You acted according to temptation, and now you're like, what came over me? I promised not to do this again. How many times, like I've promised 10 times this month not to do this, for example. There we go, I'm doing it again, right? Now, why is this happening? Why is it that the person keeps promising not to do this, but they do it again? It's because instead of accepting there's something inside them and finding a way to deal with it, they ignore it, they cut it, they throw it away from themselves, right? And the same is also with that married person who wants to feel loyal, but there's part of them that they never admit. Now, even after the person acts, for example, acts out that temptation and does that action, right? And then once the action is done, they're back to their senses. This part of the personality takes over. What happens? And I really want to ask you, well, if you have similar experiences, to try and see what was happening inside you at that moment. The person feels like, oh, damn it, I'm a terrible person. I'm an awful person. Okay? Why is this happening? Because for this person, self-image is binary. You're either a good person or a bad person. Yeah? They can't accept that there's like it's not either 0 or 1. No, there are levels. It's, you can be, that it's a very complex thing. But for them, you're either a good person or a bad person. Previously, their idea was that I'm a good person because they had suppressed the part that they didn't like. Now, this part took over, they did an action. So they're like, okay, if I did it, I'm a bad person. I'm a terrible person, right? Because to them, you're either good or bad. You can't be, for example, a good person who makes mistakes. Or you can't be a person who's trying, who has good parts, bad parts. No, they're not looking at the world in a very nuanced way, right? Most of us, our self-image is very fixed. You're either good or bad, right? When you suppress your temptations, oh, I'm a good person. Temptations, we know, oh, I'm a bad person, right? And no one can accept, no one can accept the pressure of being a bad person. It's like, it's a torture for our ego. It's torture to think you're a bad person, right? So imagine, all this time you built your self-image by denying the realities inside you, like the temptations, the pleasures you would get, etc. You thought, I'm a good person because I'm not doing that act. And suddenly, voila, you did the act. You did it. Say you enjoy the scene or whatever. Like, think of anything in your life which you're trying to ignore and suddenly comes up. Now, afterwards, because you've done it, you feel like, okay, I must be a terrible person. Now, because we can't accept being a bad person, it's killing the ego. It tortures us to be bad. We're like, okay, I need to regain control. I have to be good. I'm a good person. I have to be good again. How can I do that? Let me again push this down. So what do? Instead of learning a lesson, instead of saying this keeps happening, I need to deal with this, I need to talk to this part of myself, we're like, no. Let me push this part of myself back in the shadows again, right? So you make a decision. I'm never gonna do this again. This is not who I am. This is bad. This is nasty. This is disgusting. This is not me. You hate this part, you throw it away, and you make a decision that I'm never going to do that again. And as soon as you do that, oh, yeah, I'm a good person again. I'm a good person, yes. You feel good about yourself. But how did you get there? By, again, going through the same cycle, deleting part of yourself, creating that fragmentation inside, and which means that the cycle going to happen again. Maybe in 2 months, maybe in 1 month, and for some people, maybe the same day in 2 hours. Right? We keep promising and we ignore part of ourselves. Okay. Now, so keep this. So this was our relation with ourselves. Now I want to talk to you about how this also impacts our relationship with God. See, when a person keeps denying part of themselves, they feel that even when they go to God, they can't take that part of themselves with them. All right? And I want to look at your own life, okay? I went for the example of anger and lust and maybe sexual temptations, but this could be about anything. right? So try and see if you can find that thing in your life which you have tried to ignore, which you have tried with, for example, happens, and it makes you feel so guilty, so bad about yourself that you try to not think about it, make a decision not to do it, etc., etc. Think of that. And I want to show you that when this happens, check if I'm right or not with your own experience. Usually, when a person behaves this way towards a part of themselves, they think that when this action is not there, they can go to God. They're worthy of God, right? Masalan, a person who's dealing, for example, a person who's not married, they're dealing with a certain temptation, with certain act. When they're not doing that, they feel like, oh, I can go to God. And they feel like their relationship with God is good. As soon as they make that mistake, they commit that mistake, they feel like, oh, I can't go to God, right? Or at least we can say their relationship with God suffers. So what does this show? It shows that the person is reflecting the way they are dealing with themselves to God. They're projecting it to God. What do I mean by that? Because the person cannot accept this part of themselves, they think that God is not going to accept it either. So when that action is not there, so for example, a person who gets angry, when they have, for example, for a few days, they haven't been angry, they feel like, oh, I can go to God. They feel that they're going to be received by God. Or a person who, for example, has those types of sexual temptations, when they haven't acted upon it, they're like, oh, now I can talk to God, etc. But as soon as that parts of them comes, because they're like, they can't accept it, they feel like God's not going to accept it too. So in those moments, their relationship with God suffers as well. And the person thinks that as long as they haven't ignored it again or caught it again, they cannot go to God. So in the moments in which they need God the most, they don't believe that they can go to God, because they think that, no, if this is part of me, I cannot go to God. Let me cut this again. Let me make a promise not to do this ever again. Let me ignore this as something in me. Let me again be that loyal husband. Let me again be that person who's never angry. Let me again be that pious person. Then I can go to God. Okay, what's the problem with this? The problem with this is that you are now thinking that in order to go to God, you have to ignore part of yourself. And so whenever you go to God, you are not taking the totality of yourself to God. You are not taking all of yourself to God. It's as if every time you go to God, you're keeping something out of it, parts of you. Now, I know these are the parts which you don't like, I get that. But the problem is that when you go towards God and you keep certain things outside, they are not going to like it, right? Because you've rejected part of you are. I know this part is doing things which you don't like gets angry, lashes out at other people. But that's not all it is. It may have some valid concerns, right? There's part of you there. So when you go to God, leaving some of you behind, well, then this part is going to bring you down. So you keep going towards God, but because you're not going as a total self, as a whole self, you've left part of this part is going to sabotage that relationship with God. Because you're telling it that in order for this relationship to happen, you shouldn't be part of me. And obviously, this part keeps sabotaging that relationship, right? And you can see that people have these cycles all the time. A person, for example, is going through some issues with temptations, with lust. They say, you know what, from tomorrow, I won't do this. They go start a relationship with God. And this part of them says, yeah, you want to go start a relationship without me? I'll show you. In 2 months, they make the same mistake. And the person feels like, oh, this became part of me. Now God's not going to accept me. The relationship with God, cancelled. So see, when you leave part of you behind and go to God, that part of you is going to sabotage your relationship with God. That's the first thing. The second thing is this. You are going to God, who is the source of healing, the source of change, the source of shifa, And the part of you which requires the most healing, the most shifa, you're not taking that with you. Right? When you're not angry, that part of you which is not angry doesn't need God's help. You need to take your anger to God so that it can be healed. Right? Yani, we feel like in order to go towards God, we need to leave behind all the parts of us which we don't like, not knowing that it's actually those parts of us that we need to take God, because God is the healing. God is the healer. God is the source. God is the source of all change, all healing, right? So you go to God, but you can't tell God, see, I'm an angry person. Sometimes I lash out. Or for example, God, I love you so much, and I love my, for example, husband, but sometimes I get these temptations. Sometimes I get these ideas, right? We never take these to God. As soon as these come, we think, oh, I can't talk to God. God can't accept me right now. And so you ignore that and you go to God. So you always go to God and you never mention, God, I've got these damn issues, And so the moment that we need God the most is the moment actually in which the part of us that we don't like have showed themselves. The moment of temptation, the moment of anger. It's these part of us that need God the most, that needs God's healing, God's shifa, right? So, what this reminds me of? I remember I was in a hotel with a friend of mine. We'd gone for a trip. We were staying in a hotel, and every day, for example, they come for the room service and they clean the room, etc. And so my friend was like, "Oh, let me clean the room so that when the cleaning people come, they look at it and they're like, oh, it's a clean room. They don't judge us," right? I was like, do you realize what you're doing? You're cleaning the room so that when the people come, whose job is to clean, they wouldn't judge you, And of course, I'm not saying that, for example, we should be rude or disrespectful or leave the room in a very terrible state. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying the idea to think that a person whose job is to clean, would judge you if, for example, the pillow is not in the center, or if, for example, because at the end of it, they're going to come and take the pillows away anyway. They're going to change the bed sheet. But if you think that, no, I have to make this to save an image, right? I feel like some of us with God, we're doing the same thing. God, who's there to help us heal, who's there to clean us, who's there to purify us. When we want to go to Him, we think that, no, I have to be already pure to go to God. But if you're pure, why would you need God's healing? Why would you need God's name of Ash-Shafi? Right? You don't need to purify yourself before you go to the one who's meant to help you purify yourself. Right? But that's how often most of us feel. We feel that if there's this thing inside me, I need to ignore it before I go to God, or I need to cut it away. Right? And the reason why this is happening is that we have never seen anyone who accepts us as a whole, accepts us totally. Right? We don't accept ourselves totally. Allah was giving example of anger and lust, etc. But even with other things, even when we, for example, feel tired, even when you feel lonely, even when we feel sad, even when we feel we want to cry, a lot of the times we don't like part of ourselves. We don't accept part of ourselves that want to show these things. Oh, don't cry. Don't be weak. Don't be tired. Don't be lonely. No, I'm a nice person who's so strong, right? We create an image that, no, I'm a very strong person. And then we use that as a standard and cut everything in us that doesn't match that. Oh, I'm a strong person. I'm not going to ask for help. Well, that part of you right now which needs help, you cut it. You throw it away. Oh, I'm a strong person. Strong people never cry. What about that part of you that wants to cry? You want to ignore that? You don't want to accept that? See? We don't accept who we are, and because of that, we think that God's not going to accept who we are, the whole of who we are. And perhaps the reason for this is that also we have rarely been in relationships in which a person accepted us as a whole. When we wanted to cry, they let us to cry. When we were angry, they allowed us to, to express that. When we were, for example, sad, they allowed us to do that, right? A lot of the times, we've been told that you're only acceptable if you're not all of who you are. Get these parts out. Ignore these parts, right? So because we've been treated that way in most relationships we've been, we don't accept ourselves, and also we think that God's not going to accept ourselves. Now, I am not in any way saying that, for example, if a person is lashing out, perfect, go lash out. Or if, for example, you feel temptations, go act on them. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is this, that if you don't want to lash out, if you want to be able to control your temptations, if you want to be the loyal partner that you wish to be, the way is not to ignore part of you. The way is to listen to it, see, to allow to domesticate that, create a communication with it, right? So for example, from your anger, if you ignore it, that just means that you have no communication with it, so it comes whenever it wants. But no, I'm saying accept it. Accept that this is part of who you are, right? You're a good person and there's anger inside you. Yes, so what? You don't have to be just one thing. You're not, there are so many parts to you. It's understandable. It's fine. You could be a very nice person and at the same time have part of you which wants to hurt others, gets angry at others. It's okay. That's how we are. No one is only 100% something. So you accept that part of yourself and you try to talk to it and find a way in which you can gain the good things that it has, right? Listen, maybe your anger wants to say that, you know what, stand up for yourself. So if you ignore it, you'll never learn this lesson. But you have to bring it under your control, So if there's part of you that wants to get removed of anger, and there's anger, so what you need to do is not to ignore this, is to create a new self-image, a new self, which is a combination of both of this, right? So your task is not to get rid of your anger, but your task is to bring your anger under your control, integrate it, make it part of yourself, right? And it has so many beautiful lessons for you. Stand up for yourself, be assertive, maybe in some places against some oppressors, even use that anger. But in other words, bring it under your control. Make it a tool for yourself. Make it part of your toolkit as opposed to your enemy, right? And then that way you're a larger self, you're a whole self. You're not ignoring part of yourself. And in order to get there, the first step is acceptance. To accept that, yes, anger is part of me. Well, let me give you another example. Let's say you're caring for someone. You're caring for a grandma. You're caring for your parent, right? And you've got this self-image. I want to be I'm a nice child. I'm a nice grandchild. I take care of this person. I love them, right? And every now and then you feel like inside you, there's this sense, I'm tired of this person. I want to go have my own life. But Masa, I want to go out with my friends. I have to stay home, take care of my mom, take care of my grandma, right? But because this part of you that's just tired of taking care of someone, that feels like its freedom is limited, because this doesn't match your self-image, you may ignore that. No. You don't allow yourself sometimes to feel that. You ignore it. Oh? And so it's very possible that this part will show itself in some way. You keep ignoring inside you that you're tired of taking care of someone. Suddenly it comes out, you lash out at them. Or, you know what I mean? So how do you deal with this? Accept this idea that you don't need to be one thing. You can be a very loving child who loves to take care of their parent, but at the same time sometimes gets tired of that. This doesn't mean you're not a loving person. No. This just means that you're a very complex being. Yes, you want to be there for them. You love them. You love taking care of them. but at the same time, sometimes you get tired. Sometimes you may even feel like you hate them. That's okay. It doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means that there's so much in you. You're a very complex being, right? And we can only deal with these once we accept them and we take them to God, right? We accept them, and it's only through acceptance that healing can take place. God, see, مثلا, we'll talk about the God part in a bit, right? So, yes. So yes, I lost the train of my thought, but basically there's this idea that we don't need to be one thing. We can accept the complexities in us, and it's actually through this acceptance that you can change them, you can heal them, right? So for example, your anger, we spoke about it. Once you heal it, then once you accept it, then you can heal it. With this as well, once you accept it, then you can heal it. With everything else, if you want it to get fixed, first you need to accept it, right? With the example of being a loyal partner or being a pious person, and then suddenly you feel certain temptations. You look at someone, you feel attraction, you're like, oh, I'm a loyal person, I shouldn't feel this attraction. By ignoring it, you're not solving the problem. That problem will show itself later on in some way. It's going to come and hurt you, right? But no, you can look at it this way. I am a loyal person. I love my husband. I love my wife. Or I love masalan religion. I want to be a good, for example, teenager, etc. But at the same time, there is part of me that has these temptations. There's part of me that feels certain things, right? You accept that. You're a complex being, right? We're not ma'soom to be 100% beauty, right? No. Just because you feel, for example, some sort of attraction doesn't mean that you're not a loyal person. No, accept that. What happens when we do this? We slowly, as I said, the first thing was we learned the lesson which is in that part of us. Now, from our anger, we can learn how to stand up for ourselves. But if you ignore it, you'll never learn that. With those temptations, you may, for example, realize that, oh, I have some needs which are not met. Maybe I need to talk, for example, to my partner about changing certain things. Maybe we need to add some excitement to our life. Maybe I need to, so there could be some lesson in that part of you which is feeling something that now you're ashamed of. Forget about the shame, accept it, and see what is there that wants to talk to you, right? Maybe there are beautiful lessons in that part of you, the part that feels attracted. Maybe there's beautiful lessons that you can bring it into your relationship with your partner that could make your relationship better, right? So this is the first thing, that you learn lessons. The second thing is this. When you go to God, you go as a whole person. You take all of your being. And then there is nothing which can stop your relationship with God. See, this is very important. If you think that I can only have a relationship with God and be accepted by God when I am, for example, not doing a certain action, that means that you just limited your relationship with God. Because you put a condition on it. I can only have a relationship with God when I'm not doing this action, this sin, for example. As soon as this sin comes, you've already set it the day you don't have a relationship with God. You go in a circle of shame and guilt, and you feel like, oh, I can't talk to God right now. I need to go repent, do this all so I can come back to God. Why? Start accepting that no, there is no time in which I need to stop my relationship with God. I want to have a relationship with God as a whole person, with all parts of myself, right? And so not only if I make a mistake, I'm not going to stop talking to God, but in fact, in those times, I'm going to talk to God more, because those are the times I need God more. After you do this, and this is not easy, because for us to accept this idea that it is possible to be accepted fully despite all of your challenges, despite all of your shortcomings. This is a very difficult idea for us to accept, because most of us, we have never seen this. And we have never seen anyone who accepted us like that, right? Very rarely we come across a person who's so unconditionally supportive, unconditionally receptive. But the more you practice this with God, the more you realize that God is a being that is fully accepting of whatever state you are in, spiritually, psychologically, whether you have anger within you, whether you have jealousy within you, whether you have a shortcoming within you, whatever is inside you, God wants the whole thing and accepts it. Then, once you start accepting this, you realize that, oh my God, the only way actually to create a change, to heal the anger, to heal those temptations, to heal those desires, to heal, for example, all of that, was through this relationship with God. Right? So the prescription, the treatment is to feel God's unconditional love, this God's acceptance, and God's healing power that comes through that. That was the prescription. That was the treatment. But a lot of the times we sabotage this, because as soon as there's parts of us, we stop going to God. No, God's not going to accept me. Right? خب. Hala, all of this I said, Imam Ali has saved it in one line. See, it's very interesting. All of these things that I said, Imam Ali mentioned it in one line. Ilahi, lam yakun li hawlun fa'antaqila bihi an ma'siyatik illa fi waqtin ayqaftani li mahabbatik. Imam Ali says, God, the only time I have the strength to heal myself, the parts of myself which I don't like or which are not in line with my goal, is when I feel you are accepting me as a whole. I feel your acceptance, and through that acceptance and love, I learn not to block your healing, and as a result of this relationship with you, I get changed. You see? But most of the times, we don't allow this to work. And it's not that, so that was the sentence, God, I only have the strength by which to remove my shortcomings, to heal my, for example, when I feel your love. Oh, who's blocking this? Is God not showing us love? No, it's us. We keep blocking God's love for us. How? By saying, no, I don't deserve it. Right? As soon as there's parts of us we don't like oh, I don't deserve God's love right now. I need to cut this away. I need to cut that. We don't take these things to God. Yani, the prescription, Imam Ali says, to accept God's love no matter where you are, accept that, allow God to heal you, allow God to change you. But we're saying no. Masala, as soon as we have a shortcoming, instead of going to God with it, we're like, no, let me cut this away, let me ignore it, let me hide it behind the carpet, let me not think about it, and go to God as a very neat and cute and nice person. Right? So that's basically the part which I wanted to, and all of this was basically the commentary on one line from Imam Ali alayhi salam. Right? So now you can see that all of this time I wasn't promoting people to get angry, or I wasn't saying that, oh, you should go, for example, act on your temptations, etc. No. All I'm saying is this: if there's part of you that you feel like is not in line with who you want to be, مثلا there's temptation, there's anger, there's attractiveness to someone you don't want to be, or مثلا you're taking care of someone but you feel some sort of tiredness or hate inside you, if there's this thing, the solution, Imam Ali says, if you want to heal this, if you don't want to be like that, if you don't want to be angry, if you don't want to lash out, if you don't want to have those temptations, the solution is not to hate this part, ignore it, throw it away. The solution is to accept it's there. Oh, this is part of me. And as a whole, go to God and ask for help. See? So at the end of the day, I want to do what you want to do, which is help you not be angry, help you not be having those temptations. But I'm just saying the solution is not to ignore it. The solution is not to feel shame about it. The solution is not to pretend it's not there. The solution is not to feel like, oh, I'm a bad person. No, the solution is to accept it, accept it's there because it's there. What can you do? I wish it wasn't there, but it's there. Now you accept it's there, but despite this, God still accepts me, loves me, and has the power to heal me.